According to legend, there was a tree on the northern continent that could control life and was called Kista. Long ago, those who believed that the tree's power would one day manifest itself waged war to seize it. Yet no one has ever been able to master Kista. To ensure that no one could gain access to Kista, the kings of each of the 5 continents agreed to lock the tree away. Now, many years later, a little girl was found on the doorstep of the royal palace of the central continent. She had earthy green hair and big brown eyes, as well as a mark on her arm in the shape of a tree. Because the child had a birthmark similar to Kista, she was quickly crowned Princess of the Central Continent and given the name Eliza. To awaken her powers, Eliza studied hard and practiced endlessly. However, she showed no signs of any abilities. Eventually, the young princess was placed in a separate wing of the castle. A few years later, one morning, a maid came to the princess with her breakfast, and after putting it on the table a second later, a drop of water from the roof fell into the bowl of soup. The princess realized that most likely it was because of yesterday's rain, but asked the maid not to worry, but she quickly took the bowl of soup and left. After the maid left, her father came into her room. He had never come here before, and she wondered why he had come to see her. Her father was in a bad mood, and was indignant that she was surrounded by wild animals as usual. But after these words, the bird that had been sitting on Eliza's shoulder flew away. Then he said that he had decided to marry her to the Prince of the North, but she thought she should have married the Prince of the East. His Highness did not understand what was good in marrying a prince who could not inherit the throne, and besides, he had heard that the people of the North were barbarians who practically worshipped nature, and in his opinion, it was the perfect place for her. He wanted her to think that she was a girl of unknown origin who had none of Kista's abilities, and all she did was attract wild animals. It was a disappointment to him, and he thought that if she finally wanted to repay him for the kindness he had shown her over the years, he would be kind enough to marry the Prince of the North and start packing. When he passed by her, he said that in a week she would go to the northern continent, and at that moment she could not stand on her feet and fell on her knees. Then, after her father left, she went out on the terrace where all her little friends were wondering what had happened to her. When she sat down on the floor, a sparrow flew up to her and said hello to her again, saying how beautiful she was. Everyone around her saw tears on her face, and they wanted to know who made her cry and who dared to do it. The cat that was sitting next to her asked what had happened to her, and she said that she would not be able to see them anymore. The rabbit was hysterical and couldn't believe that she would leave them, but the cat interrupted him and said that they should listen to her first. Eliza said that she would have to go to a faraway place to get married, but her friends said that then they would go with her and follow her wherever she went. She said regretfully that the place was very cold and there was little food, so even if they went with her, she was afraid they wouldn't live long. Elise wondered if the Northern Prince expected her to have any powers, and looking at her hand, she realized it was all because of the birthmark. When the princess was younger, her father caught a rabbit because he had heard from the servants that Eliza talked to animals. He wanted to know what this rabbit was saying. She asked if the little guy was okay, but he painfully replied that this man had broken his leg and he was a nasty man. She wanted to promise that he would be cured, but then she realized that the father had only done it to see Kista's power in action. She realized that if she told him correctly what was wrong with the rabbit, then he would definitely not limit himself to one rabbit. Then the princess said she wasn't sure what was wrong with the rabbit. If her abilities were found out, many weak and powerless animals would no doubt be sacrificed. She couldn't let anyone find out about her abilities. One winter evening, a report was brought to the man from which he learned of Kista's powers. The aide told him that it looked like people were looking forward to meeting a bride with such extraordinary powers. But the man thought it was just a legend, and he doubted she had any real powers. But he also felt that it should have been enough for an excuse. The aide emphasized that at least it gave their proud Northerners a reason to view this political marriage in a positive light. Then the man told Isak that they should start preparing for the arrival of this legendary bride. In a couple of days, Eliza would be traveling. Everyone near her home was watching, and they all knew that she was the only princess that lived in an isolated wing and was essentially sold to these barbarians from the north. The Ludi didn't even know if they could even consider her a princess. It took the princess a couple minutes to get to the main building where she met His Majesty. He approached his daughter, congratulating her on her marriage. He wanted her to live as quiet as a dead mouse, just like she did here. Suddenly, crows swooped between them and asked Eliza if he had caused her any trouble, but she said it was all right and they couldn't worry. He tensed up after this raid and said they were just sad to see the princess leave. Just at that moment, the guards started to take the princess to the carriage, but she started to resist. She did not want to leave, as she had not yet said goodbye to her animal friends. The animals were upset and wanted her to promise that she would come to visit them and not forget them. Then the rabbit wished Elise to stay strong. Crying, she got into the carriage and promised that she would make sure that no animals were hurt because of her. But to do that, she had to be strong and walk with her head held high. Her journey was a long one through endless fields, through dense forests, and finally they arrived in the north. Eliza looked out of the carriage window and was struck by the beauty of the cold and harsh winter. She found it hard to believe that this beautiful land was called the land of barbarians. But even though it was very beautiful but very cold, her face began to burn, and her body began to shiver, and she began to fall asleep. The princess had a dream of the past where she begged her father to stop forcing her, but he kept shouting, saying that if she awakened her powers, they could create an army of strong animals. He couldn't believe that his daughter really didn't know what those animals were saying. Their fight was watched by a man and his son. He noticed that his son and his fiancée had a lot in common. He was talking about how Lucio kept his secrets. His father told him to take the secrets to his grave and promised him riches if he swore to keep them to himself until his older brother ascended to the throne. Then, Lucio gave his word that he would do so. Lucio then went to Eliza thinking that his father was right and they really were alike. While the princess was sitting on the floor crying, she noticed someone approaching her, and looking up, she saw that it was Lucio Pentaro from the eastern continent. He bowed and greeted her, and asked her to let him help her, and held out his hand, and Eliza quickly accepted her help and stood up. Meanwhile, in the morning on the eastern continent, an assistant came to Lucio's office. He brought the prince a letter from Princess Eliza. With trembling hands, he held out the letter saying that it said she was on her way to the Sulphur Continent to marry a prince there. Lucio realized that this had happened because he had failed to ascend to the throne, and the princess had decided to marry the heir to the northern throne. He couldn't say that he didn't expect this from the king of the central continent, but was the queen's status so important that he went so far as to sell poor Eliza to the barbarians? The aide decided to ask what His Highness would do, and he replied that when the time came, he would be there to lend her a helping hand. In the morning, the princess woke up to the fact that the carriage had stopped, and a guard came up to her saying that they would make a short stop. So she decided to get out of the carriage and realized that it was even colder outside than inside. She wondered if she had anything to wrap herself in. So she decided to go to the guard and asked him if he could prepare a change of clothes or warm clothes for her, and he apologized, saying that they didn't have any warm clothes with them. The princess couldn't believe it, as everyone knew how severe the frost was on the northern continent, but the guard said it was the king's order. He also said that the king wanted her to look beautiful in this dress until she arrived in the northern continent. No one would care about her if she froze to death, and all they cared about was sending her north, and she was sure she would get the same treatment there, and no one would be looking out for her there either, so everything hung up on her. She firmly told him to bring all the spare clothes he had on hand, and then they brought her a plaid, and she wrapped her hair in it and sat down in the carriage, but still she could not get warm. At sunset, the young princess finally reached her destination. When they arrived, she got out of the carriage and everyone who met her saw her. Then the boys from the prince's guard saw that she had only 3 suitcases with her, and they couldn't believe that it was all her luggage. And considering that she was wearing a very thin dress, they thought that everyone should know what the weather was like. Isak thought that at this rate she would freeze to death before she reached the palace. And even if she was a princess of unknown origin, she was married off for political gain, and yet they treated her so badly. He walked up to her and greeted her, saying he was honored to meet her. He also introduced himself and said he would be her interpreter. Eliza greeted him cheerfully and thought that these people were nothing like the barbarians she had been told about. When her guards had finished unloading her luggage, Isak offered her a ride in their carriage and she gladly accepted. Isak and his assistant brought a warm cloak for her. Eliza asked why it was so warm in their carriage, and the boy answered that it was made of a dense material that did not let the cold in. The girl brought warming tea for the princess, and she was touched by such a small thing. Isak saw how she was touched by something so simple and could imagine how she had been treated so far. He asked to let them escort her safely to the palace of the northern continent. After a while, the princess realized that all this talk about the northerners being barbarians was nothing but a bunch of unfounded rumors. After a while, she fell asleep, but after a while she was awakened by the cries of the guards as the wolves approached. Isak said soothingly that their guards were armed and ready to defend themselves. Eliza looked out the window again and realized that the wolves had followed her because they thought she was in danger, and now she didn't know what to do, because at this rate both the guards and the wolves would be in danger. She also realized what could happen if she interfered. They could realize that she could communicate with animals. But the princess still decided to run out of the carriage and prevent a fight between the guards and the wolves. She stepped in front of a pack of wolves and started talking to the pack leader. The pack leader told her that these men were dangerous and reeked of blood from a mile away, and she needed to stay away from them. Eliza noticed that he probably didn't know that he smelled blood too, because he shed blood to protect his favorite mate, cubs and pack. And the same was true for humans, because they sacrificed to protect those they cared about. The princess asked the leader not to worry about her, for she was safe with them. Isak was surprised to see the princess calm the wolves. His mate couldn't understand what had just happened, and Isak said they were never supposed to talk about what they had witnessed today. As Eliza walked back to the carriage, she stumbled and felt sick. Isak caught her and asked if she was all right, but then touching her forehead, he realized that the princess had a high fever. The princess was carried into the carriage, and Isak told the assistant to bring some medicine, but Eliza said she was fine. Isak realized that the medicine they had with them was not strong enough, so they had to hurry. By morning at sunrise, they arrived at the palace, and the guards ordered the carriage to open the gates. One of the guards took Eliza out of the carriage and carried her to the castle, and Isak said that she had a bad cold and he had to get some medicine immediately. The others thought she wasn't doing too well and hoped she would get better, but one of the guards said mockingly that it seemed like a bad omen since she was already sick on arrival. But suddenly, a tall figure appeared behind him. The Prince of the North himself came up to him and said that they were all free. He went to the guard who was holding the princess and said that it would be better if he carried his bride. He realized that she was weaker than he expected. From this talk, Eliza woke up, and when she saw his face, she realized it was Kale Fiena. The prince had told everyone that she wasn't feeling well, and so she needed to be put to bed immediately. Eliza had been in bed for a few days now, and Isak stood by her side and said it looked like she had a fever after leaving the central continent. He also suggested that it might have shifted the schedule. But the prince said it was fine, and they didn't need to hurry, and also told him to help the princess adjust to life here as soon as she recovered. Isak realized that now was not the best time to report what had happened to the wolves. After the prince left, Eliza woke up and Isak came over to her asking how she was feeling. When she sat up, she said she felt like she had been asleep for a very long time and decided to ask how long she had been asleep, and the boy said she had been asleep for 2 days. He told her that her fever broke faster than he expected, and she even snored a little as soon as the fever broke. She was creeped out that she might have snored, but then the guy said it was just a joke. But she felt full of energy, and she wanted to know if she should have started preparing for the wedding. Iska said that since there was still plenty of time before the wedding, she could check out the palace first. Already walking down the street, Eliza was surprised that she thought there would be a constant snowfall, but surprisingly, the weather was warm and sunny. Then the guy said that it had snowed a few days ago, but it had melted quickly since it was spring. He also added that since it was spring, he thought the animals had already been released, and he thought she would like to see them. Then they came to a place where there were large houses for rabbits, and Eliza was delighted that there were so many of them and thought that the palace was breeding them. Isak said that in fact the palace did not breed any animals except for war horses, and that this space was created for animals that came to seek shelter, and similar rooms could be found in ordinary houses. Eliza saw a striking contrast to the central continent where people didn't care that animals were locked up. Isak looked at the princess and asked if the rabbits were different from the ones she was used to, but she said they were very different, for the rabbits there usually had much thicker fur and were darker in color. Suddenly, the rabbits started talking among themselves about how they had never seen this girl before and began to look at her. As soon as she wanted to talk to them, she checked where Isak was and saw that he was crouched far away feeding the rabbits. After she was sure he was far away, she leaned closer to them and said hello to them and told them her name and that she was from the central continent. Suddenly, they started screaming from what was around her neck and thought she was a violent person. At some point, Isak turned his attention to her and saw that she was communicating with the animals again. All the rabbits started looking at her with hostility, and she looked down at herself trying to figure out what was wrong with her neck, and then fumbling for the fur. At the same second, Isak came up to her, and she asked if it was rabbit fur, and he said yes without a second thought. She didn't care how cold the weather was. She took it off and handed it to Isak and said she would never wear a collar of their animal fur. Isak took the collar and said he would definitely take that into consideration. But then the princess heard that the rabbit thought it would not bring their dead friends back to life. So she turned to them and regretfully swore that she hadn't put it on purpose, for she didn't even know it was made of rabbit fur. But the rabbits didn't want a cruel person like her to come to them and wanted her to leave and never come back. She was really sorry that this had happened, and she thought that these rabbits were hurt because of her, and so she didn't know what to do. She realized that things were not going as well as she thought. Later, Isak came to the prince's office and reported that Princess Eliza had recovered quickly and had even toured the palace this morning. The prince couldn't believe that all the women from the central continent were so frail. Isak said that it was like the king of the central continent ordered that she was not given proper food, and from what he understood, her servants were also mistreating her, and they also called them barbarians. There was also something else he had to report to His Highness. It seemed to him that Princess Eliza had the ability to communicate with animals. The prince guessed it had something to do with the wolves they had encountered on the way here. Kale suspected there was something missing from the chief of security's report. Then Isak said that he had ordered him to leave out the details. He explained that he had given the order because it was Princess Eliza, not the guards, who had driven the wolves away. When the guards were ready to confront the wolves, the princess intervened and calmed the furious pack, and then they dispersed peacefully. The prince leaned back in his chair and asked if he was sure it was because of her, because maybe it was just luck. Isak thought it was likely, but what was more surprising than the peaceful withdrawal of the wolves was that Princess Eliza didn't show the slightest fear. Kale couldn't believe he was saying that a princess as fragile as she was stood fearlessly before a pack of wild wolves. The prince thought it was impossible unless she was firmly convinced that the wolves wouldn't attack her. Also, this morning she had been talking to the rabbits at the farm, though things had gotten a lot more tense since she had gotten there wearing her rabbit fur collar. The prince thought she must have been tormented by King Wynard, and he could imagine how he had treated her. He was probably trying to awaken her powers only to use them later. The prince thought there would be a big fuss if Eliza really did have Karista's powers. It was already evening when Eliza had her first dinner with Kale. She really regretted meeting him while she was out. She wondered what he thought of her, and if he was curious about her birthmark. The prince saw that she hadn't touched her food and thought the food wasn't to her liking, but she said it was fine and started eating. The prince also heard that they ran into trouble during her visit to the farm. Eliza said that she tried to bond with the local cute rabbits, but it wasn't as easy as she thought it would be. The prince said that it was expected since she had come there wearing a rabbit fur collar, and it was no doubt a serious mistake, and the royal servants would not have prepared it if they had known she was going to go to the farm. He also told the servants from now on to serve only cotton clothes for Princess Eliza. The prince thought the clothes would be warm enough and asked the princess for her opinion, and she said she was glad of the decision. Kale became much more serious in a second and said that he was actually very interested in how she managed to drive the wolves away. Eliza hesitated and didn't know what to say at first. She realized that they would find out her secret, and so she didn't know what to do. Then the prince said that she was very lucky because he had been told that the guards' torches had scared the wolves away. He applauded her courage, but asked her to keep in mind that wolves were dangerous animals and asked her to put her safety first next time. Eliza was pleasantly surprised and said she would. The prince asked if they were done with the meal, and she said the food was delicious. Before she left, she looked at the prince and wondered if he really didn't know anything. The next day, Isak was going to give the princess a tour of the castle and tell her more about the northern continent. As they walked down the corridor, the guy said that they would start at the place where spring first came, and so they went out into the garden. When they entered the garden, the guy said that she could look around and he had to go away, so she was glad to have a moment of privacy with nature. As she looked around the garden, the flowers on every continent were beautiful to her, and the same was true of the fascination of the animals. Suddenly, with her side vision, she happened to notice a girl at the other end of the garden. She wanted to know who she was because she was very beautiful. But then a thought occurred to her. The royalty and nobles of the central continent didn't mind having multiple lovers even if they were already married. When the princess was distracted from her speculation, she couldn't find this girl anymore. But by this time, Isak had already returned to her. He asked the princess to look at what he had brought. It was not a simple branch, it was a Kanzak branch. So the princess went with it to the rabbit farm. But they were not very happy to see her, and didn't understand how she dared to come to them again, for they had already realized everything the moment she came to them with their fur around her neck. But Eliza did not give up and handed them a sprig of Kanzak and asked them to accept it as an apology. One of the rabbits couldn't resist and grabbed the twig and said that after all she had tried her best, then why don't they calm down a bit? And after his words, the rabbits rushed to the other pieces of Kanzak twig, saying that they shouldn't have been hard on those who were trying to do good. Eliza told Isak how glad she was that there were Kanzak trees growing here. Suddenly, one of the rabbits felt some dark aura around the corner but didn't check. It was the prince, and after what he had taken away, he figured he didn't need any other proof. After the farm, Isak and the princess went to the library to study. When she saw how many books the boy had brought her, she was scared, but he was sure she would succeed. Then Isak told her that as soon as the ceremony was over, people would call her Pear. She said it sounded beautiful and asked if there was a reason for using that particular title. He said that on the northern continent, Peer was the name given to those who had responsibilities and duties that were equivalent to those of a king. He also added that the Peer of the northern continent also shared their political and military power. To the princess, this was a big difference from the central continent. He was silent for a while and couldn't make up his mind about something, and then he said that there was something more important, and that was the duty to consummate the marriage after the ceremony was over. For once the nuptials were over, she would be sharing a room with Prince Kale and consummating their marriage. Then she realized that he was right, since a wedding night was a matter of course for a married couple. But it was the girl in the garden that bothered her. After library class, she was walking down the hall, and just as she relaxed for a second, all the books she was carrying started to fall. She dropped some of the books and stooped down to pick them up, and didn't realize what was wrong with her. Then she saw that someone's shadow was falling on her. It was Kale. He silently lowered himself to her and helped her pick up the books. Looking at him, she wondered if he would be smiling if it was that girl next to him and not her. But soon she decided to push those thoughts away from her, as she didn't know if it was true. Before going to bed, the maids helped her undress and helped her get comfortable. As the princess lay on the bed, she thought that she needed to learn the language of the northern continent as soon as possible. After the maids left, she couldn't sleep, so she turned on the lamp and took a book from the bedside table and looked at it, thinking that it would have been nice if she had learned the language before coming here. Opening the book, she decided that from now on she just had to study hard. Then she remembered Isak talking about the Pear of the Northern Kingdom, and she wondered if she could become a respected Pear. The next morning, Lucio was on a hunt where he shot one bird the first time and was praised by his servants for it. He sat down in a chair and asked if they had found out what he had asked them to do. One of the boys said that since Princess Eliza had slept for 2 days, all they had done together so far was eat dinner. Lucio took it to mean that they had hardly spent any time together. His servant said that was the case. But there was one thing, and Lucio wanted to hear it. The boy told him that the Northerners considered it a bad omen that the future pair was ill when she arrived at the palace, and the prince laughed. He didn't understand what this barbaric way of thinking was. As he sipped his tea, he thought that it would not be long before he would be able to give her a helping hand again. It was already morning when Eliza woke up and got ready. She left the room and began to write down her observations that the South used a lot of spices in their cooking, while the North paid more attention to the natural flavors in their food. She didn't realize that the difference in climate had such an effect on the food. Suddenly, Kale appeared behind her. She turned to him and couldn't understand why her heart was beating so fast. She thought maybe it was because Kale had appeared so suddenly. Then he said she was overdoing it and walked past into the room behind her. But Eliza didn't understand what he was talking about and realized she needed to learn more about the northern continent. So the princess followed Kale and they walked to the dining room. It seemed to the prince that she was here as if she was here to study and not to get married. Isak said that perhaps it was because she had a great teacher. The prince saw that all she did was stare at her plate, and so it was no wonder she was so thin. Isak remembered that they hadn't considered Princess Eliza's food preferences. Kale said next time make something she would like something sweet, like cake. Isak nodded and said he would let the chef know next time. Suddenly, the prince asked if Elise liked the food, and she quickly stuffed more into her mouth and nodded. Isak chuckled and said that the princess looked like a squirrel, but the prince said in a serious tone that he should watch his words. Eliza saw them start whispering again and wondered if she would ever be able to bring a smile to Kale's face. Later, the princess went to the farm, and there she sat with a serious face, and the rabbit noticed it and said that she shouldn't make that face while he was eating that tasty twig because it was rude. Eliza laughed, and the rabbit didn't understand why, and then she said that she used to be afraid of her powers, but now she was glad she had them because she could communicate with them. Then the rabbits froze and heard something. Eliza heard the sound and realized it was coming from the garden. Eliza saw the woman she had seen the other day, and now if you looked closely, she really did look too old to be Kale's mistress. She saw the woman walk up to the guy and take off the wreath and put it on the guy's head. When the woman moved away a little, she saw that it was Kale, and a flower fell from his wreath right into the book he had in his lap. The woman picked up the flower and put it back into the wreath. Then the princess saw how sincerely Kale was smiling and was mortified. In the evening, Eliza had dinner with the prince again, and just couldn't get over the fact that this morning he had looked so happy around her. But now, he seemed so indifferent to Eliza. Suddenly, the prince coughed as if to let Isaku know, and at the same moment the doors opened and maids came in with many different flowers and placed them on the table. And to finish it off, they brought her a piece of berry cake. Isak turned to Princess Elise and told her that they had prepared some desserts for her from the central continent. She was surprised that they had prepared all this just for her. She tasted a small piece of cake and it was just great, and she liked it very much. But then she cried, and she couldn't hold in this misunderstanding of what happened today, and after this nice gesture from the prince, and she jumped up from her seat running away saying she was sorry. Neither the maids nor the prince could understand what had happened and why she ran away so suddenly upset. Eliza ran to the farm. The rabbits were happy to see her and thought she had brought a sprig of kanzak with her. But when she came closer, they saw that she was very upset and crying. They ran up to her asking what had happened to her. One of them thought that she was upset because she couldn't find a single sprig of kanzak. Then Eliza said it wasn't because of the kanzak sprigs, but because she was stepping on the same rake again, and it was weighing on her, namely being with someone who didn't love you, but instead was forced to be with you, and it was so hard. One of the rabbits indignantly started yelling about how someone in this world could not love her, and how they could not love her at all. She said she thought Kale was in love with someone else. Then one of the rabbits thought she was talking about that giant raven who always had a fierce look in his eyes. One rabbit ran up to Eliza and said that there were always only other males around him, and she never smelled any female scent from him. The rabbit also said that dwelling on it wouldn't get her any kanzak sprigs, and so she should just ask him about it and not sweat it anymore. The princess realized that they were right, and she couldn't renege on her promise because she needed to be strong. She told the rabbits that they were right, and tears didn't solve anything. So she went back to the castle, and down the hall she met the prince and his assistant. She was hindered by the fact that the prince was not alone, and now she did not know what to do. She got up her resolve and walked briskly to Isak and grabbed his hand and pulled him with her. The prince himself didn't realize what the hell had just happened. Eliza dragged Isak into the room and slammed the doors shut. He wondered what it all meant. Then the princess asked him to promise that he would answer her honestly to her question. He, on the other hand, wanted to know what that question was. He promised, and then the princess was shy and asked if Kale had a secret lover. But Isak stood silent for a couple of seconds, not understanding why she was asking such a question. And because of that, Eliza thought that he was trying to think of some excuse. Eliza said she had seen her the other day in the garden and asked if she was Kale's lover. Isak wondered who she might have seen in the garden, and when the realization came to him, he fell to his knees laughing and said that Eliza had scared him a little. He asked if she meant the woman with the long dark hair. Then she asked if she reminded her of someone, and the princess hesitated. After a moment, the princess blushed, and Isak said that the woman she saw in the garden was Kale's mother. After this conversation, the princess could not sleep. She felt like a complete fool. Isak realized that there was a misunderstanding, and that's why she was acting like that at dinner. Eliza staggered, and Isak was able to pick her up. She was sorry she had been so rude, but it seemed to her that if she didn't leave, it would only get worse. Isak noticed that she was very determined when she grabbed him. He should have told her earlier, but in this particular situation, he didn't even think she could have misunderstood. Then she motioned for her to sit down. The princess sat down and asked what this special situation was. Isak, after a little thought, said that here in the north, the king's seat was vacant at the moment, and Mr. Kale was just temporarily acting as king. But there was still Lady Lepenfiena, who also had the right to the throne, so there were difficulties in choosing a successor. The princess realized that the woman's name was Lepen. Isak added that the lady was not only the mother of Mr. Kale, but also the ancestor of her people in the northern continent. He also said that after that day she had forgotten not only who she was, but that Mr. Kale was her son. There were times when she remembered, but they had little contact with each other, so they had grown distant. In the north, no one but the ruling family could ascend to the throne, but now it was completely unacceptable. Eliza said with a tear that it was different on the central continent, but that she had been disrespectful here. But Isak said it was all right. At night, Eliza sat on her bed and realized why Kale and her mother's conversation in the garden had been so sweet. She didn't want to believe that she couldn't help them. In the morning, Eliza went to the training ground where she saw Kale practicing. She noticed her heart began to beat faster at the sight of him, and soon he saw that she was watching him. So she went over to him and told him that she just wanted to apologize to him for acting so inappropriately at dinner last night, and she came over here without permission and seemed to be interrupting. She held out the towel to him and thought she was supposed to be speaking to him in the northern language, and she was still struggling to formulate such complex sentences in it. The prince took the towel from her and was able to wipe her face while she was embarrassed at the thought that she should have gone along with Isak. As she wiped away the sweat, he covered his face as he blushed and couldn't understand why his heart hurt so much. He pulled himself together and told the princess that she could watch him train, and she thanked him. The princess marveled at his lunges. He was so fast she couldn't even keep up with his movements. A bird flew to her and told her that she remembered Kale crying as if it was only yesterday, but he was already so grown up. Eliza couldn't understand why he was crying. The bird told her that when he was little, he couldn't even hold his sword properly and kept falling down with it. Then he didn't say a word but mooed and cried. After a couple of seconds, the prince broke away from the training and saw the princess smiling as if a bird had told her something funny. The prince was charmed by her smile and didn't even notice how he wasn't hiding the fact that he was already looking at her. Suddenly, the bird flew off Eliza's shoulder as if it was afraid of something. Then she suddenly heard someone's thoughts that someone wanted to kill him, and if it didn't succeed this time, they would try next time. The princess turned around and couldn't understand what was the matter. Then she saw that the prince was already standing in front of her with his sword at the ready. Then she looked at the wolf who was coming towards them and recognized him as the leader of the wolf pack they had met on the way to the northern continent. Just as Kale was about to swing his sword at the wolf, Eliza ran out in front of him and told him to stop. The prince told her it was dangerous here, and she had to leave. At their cries, the servants came in, and the wolf turned to them and started to scowl. Then she asked the prince to call Isak. He listened to her, and putting his sword in his sheath, ordered her to call for Isak. He came in a couple of minutes later, realizing that the situation was repeating itself, and it seemed that there was no way to pretend that nothing had happened. The princess asked the interpreter to bring food, as it seemed to her that the wolf had not eaten anything for days. He nodded and said he would, and the princess thanked him. Then she went to the wolf and told him that he would be brought food, but he had to stay still and rest. The princess sat down to the wolf, and he put his head on her feet. Only the prince wanted to say something to her, as Isak stopped him as it was all right. From the last of his strength, the wolf said that he realized she didn't care, but asked her to help his dying female first. Then she said she would ask to give food for his pack as well. Eliza told him that he was their pack leader and had to take care of himself first because he was responsible for his entire family. The princess turned to Kale and asked him for some water. He handed her a flask and she got the wolf drunk. As he watched the princess nursing the wolf, he remembered his mother doing the same. Later in the castle, the prince told her that he had treated animals differently from a young age, but he didn't understand how she was able to get out of this dangerous situation so easily. She lowered her head and said that the wolf had a scar on its face, just like the wolf she had met on her way to the northern continent. He had let her go then, and now she thought she should have fed him for it and everything would be fine. The prince realized that she was still hiding her abilities, and apparently Eliza didn't trust him. Then he lifted her chin, saying that she shouldn't have bowed her head as if she was guilty of something. Then he looked at her and decided to pull away, and said that the situation had been resolved peacefully, and not a single drop of blood had been spilled, and it was all thanks to Elise. Isak also came to them and said that she would make a great pair. He also said that she had a busy day today, so maybe tomorrow or the day after tomorrow his words would become reality. Suddenly a guard burst into their office, apologizing for coming so late, but he had something to tell them. The prince asked what was wrong, and the guard began his report. Eliza still didn't understand what they were talking about and asked Isak if she could find out what the conversation was about. He told her that the guard had said that with the coming of spring, the sacred tree of Kista began to wither rapidly. Then she realized that this had happened just after she had arrived on the northern continent. Eliza began to worry that she would have to go back to her father. Her worries were seen by Kale, and he asked what was wrong with her. She didn't decisively say that the reason the Kista tree was withering was probably because of the mark on her hand. The prince and his aide didn't understand how that could be related. Eliza said that the king of the central continent had always said that the mark could bring either great good or great sorrow. Isak didn't think that was the reason, but she was still worried that she didn't know why she had the mark, but thought she might have unwittingly made the tree worse. Then the prince said that even if the mark was related to Kista's power, it didn't mean that the tree was withering because of Eliza. The princess was pleased to hear that, but she didn't understand why he didn't accuse her of anything. Kale also said that there were a lot of rumors and few people who really knew anything about Kista, so he suggested they take the opportunity to try and find out for themselves. Isak also said that there were many books on the northern continent that spoke of Kista's power and they would be useful. In the morning, Isak brought Elise a map of the old continent and told her that today they would begin to study Kista's power in detail. It had north, south, east, east, and center on it. It was a map of the world that was before the division into 5 continents. Isak said that it was said that the Kista tree was born long before the division of the continents. The Kista tree that grew on the central continent eventually grew into a huge tree that was located between what are now the northern and eastern continents. Later, but only once, a fruit grew on the tree, and the southern continent tried to take possession of the fruit by summoning evil creatures. But right after that, the southern continent became uninhabited. Elise wondered who ended up taking the fruit, and the boy said that there was a suggestion that it fell to the ground and Kista herself devoured it. He went on to say that when the fruit ripened, it went back into the ground following the law of nature. It would rot to become food for the tree and then be reborn again and again. Then Eliza realized that the fruit was nothing but a symbol of the cycle of nature. Isak agreed with her and added that the fruit had become a kind of vessel for Kista's power before the tree had completely died. It could also be assumed that the fruit fell to the ground and became food for Kista, giving her new strength to return. Eliza assumed then that Kista needed the new fruit to stop withering. Isak thought that might have been the case, but at the moment it was not known if the fruit actually existed. He thought that her mark on her arm was the key to finding the fruit. Then Eliza said incomprehensibly that she didn't have any power. Then she wondered if her power to understand animals could be the key to finding the fetus, but now was not the right time, and it would be better to hide that ability for now. As they walked down the corridor, they met one of the servants, and he greeted her and then began to say something in the northern language. Eliza shook her head, hoping Isak would help her. Then he let out a chuckle and thought it seemed that word had spread about her. He told her that the thing was that this guy said he had picked up this golden rabbit that had fallen off a cliff and wanted to give it to Her Highness as a wedding present, but he resisted. At this point, the rabbit started screaming again that they were abusers and wanted to be released. Elise thought he was in a lot of pain, but he still resisted. Isak reached for the rabbit, but it bit him. Elise said she would take him and get him treated right away. Eliza also said that she was glad he had brought the wounded animal to her, but she asked Isak to tell him that he didn't have to give her his prey. Isak wondered if Mistress was an animal lover and said he knew she would say that. Eliza took the rabbit and said she couldn't figure out where it hurt while it was lashing out like that. He asked to let him go since he lived alone anyway. He didn't need help, and asked her to just let him go. But Eliza thought he needed help anyway. Suddenly, the rabbit smelled the wolves, and Eliza said that their pack was guarding the territory. Then he started to hurt, and it hurt so bad he couldn't stand it. His whole body ached, and he was scared. Eliza hugged him and told him he didn't need to be scared and everything would be okay, but he suddenly passed out. She called out to him, but he didn't respond. He wanted to save him. He was getting worse, and his breathing was slowing down. She started crying and begged the rabbit to come back to life, and then a miracle happened. Her tears rolled down her cheeks and fell on her hand, which had a tree on it, and then it started to glow. When she raised her hands, she couldn't understand what it was. She thought it was madness and leaned her hands on the rabbit, hoping it would help, and he started to come to his senses. He could feel the warmth from her hands and couldn't understand what was wrong with them. The rabbit had already fully regained consciousness and said her hands started to radiate warmth and light, and then he suddenly felt better. Looking at her hands again, she thought that her kindness had helped him heal because she had wished it. The rabbit exhaled, and it seemed to him that now he would live. He climbed down from her lap onto the bed and asked her to let him lie like that for at least a minute. Relaxing, the rabbit told her that he was actually an outcast, and the other rabbits treated him very badly. Then the princess realized that they had abandoned him. In that case, Eliza said that he could have stayed here, but the rabbit didn't understand why because he was being mean to her. Then she said that they were friends and so he could stay. Then he was touched that he had a friend, because he had never heard that word from anyone before, and he cried. Eliza decided to give him a name in memory of their friendship and called him Goldie. The rabbit asked what the word Goldie meant, and then Eliza looked out the window and said that it meant sunset when the sun was setting and the sky was colored gold, and now she would call him Zakat. Then they both sat and enjoyed the beautiful sunset. Already in the morning, the maids were brushing Mistress's hair and watching her interacting with the rabbit. He asked if she was very nervous, and she replied that her wedding was coming up. One maid leaned over to pet the rabbit, and he said it was annoying, but today wasn't such a bad day, so she could look at it. That second, Isak came into her room and was surprised that the rabbit that bit him was still with the princess. Isak said that the wedding was to end with the lighting of the torches. Eliza was surprised as their customs were very different from those of the central continent. Then the boy said that on the northern continent, they had a special belief that the more torches lit at the wedding, the stronger the marriage would be. The weather for her wedding was supposed to be nice, but it was overcast and windy. Eliza was greeted by Kale and held out his hand to say that his bride was finally here. It seemed like just yesterday she was afraid to even think about Kale taking her hand, but she didn't have to make sense of it, because everything Kale did was just a forced act, an obligation. But somehow everything that was happening was so pleasant. The priest asked if they had sworn to trust each other in all things and to be faithful to their marriage. Kale swore that even if spring was fleeting, he promised to warm her with his warmth. Eliza also vowed that even if spring was fleeting, she promised that she would become spring for him. Then the priest said they could begin the ceremony. The two of them held the torch and brought it to the blue fire and lit it. But as soon as they lit it, it began to rain heavily, and everyone present was puzzled by it. Eliza was upset, because if the fire went out, everyone would think it was a bad omen. Kale realized that they had to get the ceremony over with as soon as possible. The princess didn't want to disappoint them and asked the rain to stop and asked the torch to be lit anew. The fire became much bigger than it was before, and her hand shone with the same light as when she had healed the rabbit and was happy that she had succeeded. The prince also saw the green glow and realized that Eliza must have used her power. Then everyone shouted that the Fiend family was blessed and the forces of nature were on their side. Then, unexpectedly, Eliza was picked up by Kale in her arms. Kale looked at his wife with such tenderness and said that he wanted her fame to be eternal. As night fell, Kale carried her to bed and gently laid her down and began to untie the laces of his shirt. Suddenly, he saw something and sat down next to Elise and reached closer and closer to her. She didn't realize what was wrong. He was already in her face and she didn't realize what he was doing and tried to stop him because she wasn't ready. In the morning, the maids came to Eliza and started whispering amongst themselves that something must have happened during the night, and their screams were unusual. Then they looked at the mistress and saw her sitting down. Isak also came to her room and heard the maids talking among themselves and saying that Mr. Kale must have overdone it, while the other one thought that it was not wrong for the animals to follow Mistress Peer and felt sorry for her. Isak fixed his glasses and thought that the people's opinion of the prince was getting worse. At the same time on the training ground, 2 guards were discussing the prince and thought that a real man from the northern continent would never treat a woman so cruelly. The other guy remembered that he had even forbidden hunting, and he thought it was for the sake of the lady, but apparently he had turned into a beast himself, unable to resist the animal instinct. Kale was surprised that they were talking about it right here, and how could they think he hadn't heard them? He was tired of the gossip and turned to the boys and said that they must have misunderstood, but they immediately pretended that they had to feed the wolves. Now Kale felt like the most egregious scoundrel on the northern continent. Meanwhile, Eliza was practicing her reading, and Isak was thinking about the fact that Mistress was trying her best to blend into the life of the northern continent, but it didn't matter to Mr. Kale. So he turned to Mistress and said that he would like to apologize to her for Mr. Kale being rude to her last night. But Eliza thought she was the one who needed to apologize, since she was the one who had made so much noise. Isak couldn't accept that she was apologizing for it, because it was the master who forced her. But she indignantly said that she should have apologized in this situation, and he kept insisting that it was not her fault, because the man who had treated the woman so cruelly should have been deprived of the right to touch her at all. Then she said that she shouldn't have done it, and said that he had misunderstood everything, because it wasn't her who had been hurt, it was Kale. But Isak couldn't understand what had happened. Then she told him that Kale was coming toward her, and he was telling her not to move because there was a moth behind her, but she couldn't understand why he had such a determined look in his eyes. Then Isak realized that she didn't know anything about the moths of the northern continent. Eliza continued that Kale then said he would be done with him soon and reached for her, but she was thinking the wrong thing and thought he would hurt her. So then she screamed and shoved Kale off of her. Then she actually saw a moth circling near her and realized that when he said moth, he meant a real moth. Then she felt ashamed and moved to the edge of the bed to see if Kale was okay and saw that he had blood on his lip. Then he got up from the floor and, wiping his lip, said that she was probably tired and wanted to rest. The prince also said that he had a lot of state business to attend to, so he would go to work. At the end of her story, Isak wondered how he would not burst out laughing, and Eliza added that she must have been the first mistress to kick her husband on their wedding night. Barely holding himself together, Isak said that now he would have to dispel the rumors that had spread through the castle. But Eliza didn't know anything about the rumors. Then Isak said that the rumors were that the Lord had been cruel and rough with her on their wedding night. But Eliza immediately said that wasn't true, and she had to do something to clear Kale's name. She asked if there was any way to fix all those rumors she had generated about Kale. After a while, Isak pulled out the royal embroidery kit because he knew his day would come someday. He told her she must have seen the handkerchiefs that knights used to hang on their swords. This handkerchief wives gave to their husbands, putting their love into it and creating a talisman that would protect them. Eliza liked this custom very much, and Isak also said that the Lord would be impressed if she gave him the handkerchief before the upcoming jousting tournament. But there was one problem: Elise had never tried embroidery before. But Isak said that in any case, Kale was the best swordsman on the northern continent, so he would definitely win, and his famous horse would be hers. But she didn't understand why. The guy said that traditionally, the winner of a knight's tournament gave the horse on which he won to his beloved. It was a kind of loyalty oath. The knight promised his beloved to be as reliable support as this horse was for him. Then Eliza realized that she had to do her best too, and Isak promised that he would support her. Eliza practiced embroidery for half a day and saw that there were birds outside the window and decided to ask how she was doing. She said she had practiced embroidering flowers, but the birds couldn't even think they were supposed to be flowers. Some of the birds thought they should have told her they looked strange, but another bird decided they didn't need to do that as it would upset Eliza. Finally, the day of the knight's tournament came and Kale was ready for it. The girl was thrilled a horse was so beautiful, and she had never seen such a horse before. She also remembered Isak telling her that it would be a vow for her and couldn't believe that Kale would actually bring it. Isak leaned over to her and said it was about time she gave him the handkerchief and motioned for her to come down to the arena. She had seen other girls giving their husbands handkerchiefs too and wished they would be more careful. Then she saw a beautiful embroidery with a composition of yellow flowers, and all the knights envied their captain. Then Eliza frowned as compared to that girl's embroidery. Her embroidery was terrible. When she approached Kale, she thought he should not see her horrible embroidery. She decided to tie the handkerchief on her sword so he wouldn't see it right away. But Kale decided to unwrap the handkerchief and look at it, and then Eliza thought he would be ashamed of her. Then he said that it was the flower of Kanya, and all the knights were thrilled that she had embroidered the flower of the northern continent, and they considered her a true mistress. Elisa's spirits lifted then, and she hoped that the duel would go smoothly for her husband. When the duel began, Kale realized he shouldn't have been hurt. Then he faced his opponent with swords. Kale was easily able to disarm his opponent and knock his sword away. At the end of the fight, Kale and his opponent bowed to each other. Isak couldn't understand why the Lord didn't say anything, but Eliza thought it was all right and he didn't have to. Suddenly, a guy came up to Isak and said that the Lord had asked her to come down to his arena. Eliza couldn't understand what happened, and if he wanted to make an oath, and if not, then the scene everyone was waiting for wouldn't happen. When she got down to the arena, Kale came up to her and made a knightly bow. At the same time, a small white horse was brought into the arena. Kale explained that the black horse he fought on was too used to him, so he decided to give her this horse. But as soon as Isak handed her the reins, the horse bucked. She said that they should have realized that if Eliza took it, she would become a laughingstock, so she should have said now that she didn't need anything. Eliza couldn't understand why she said that. Then the horse replied that she was smaller than the others and too white. At first, she was a decoration for them, and then they got rid of her. Eliza thought those people were fools, and the horse said that breeders from the central continent sold her here. Then the mistress said that she used to hear the word useless a lot to her, and she too was locked up in the central continent. She too was just an ornament to them. Now she realized that the word useless was not appropriate here at all. She realized that she didn't have to prove her worth to anyone she could and wanted to live an easy, ordinary life, so she said that the horse could choose. She asked the horse if it wanted to continue to be just someone's jewelry or if it wanted to travel the world with her. Then the horse accepted her offer and allowed herself to be petted. After that, Kale began to applaud them, and Isak realized that everything had happened just as the Lord had said. Kale was sure that Eliza would definitely be able to raise and educate this horse. When they left the arena, the horse was wondering if it could be as good as Kale's horse. Then Eliza asked what she meant, and the horse said she was talking about being as tall and she wanted to be a great racehorse. Eliza turned to her and stroked her mane and said she would help her to do that, so she should not refuse to eat or train with others and instead be active and eat right. When Mrs. Lepin saw all this, she thought it was lovely. Elise somehow found the atmosphere around her unusual, and Lepin said that she must have disturbed them, but Elise said that was not the case, and she could take it easy and they could talk. Lepin said she had a request for her, that's why she came here. So they went and sat on a bench that wasn't far away, and the horse was lying next to them. Lepin said that she was strong, and when she first came here, everyone was very surprised. Eliza said that she only pretended to be tough, but was actually very vulnerable inside. Lepin became sad in a moment and said that it was like Kale, because he was also very vulnerable, but he always seemed unshakable on the outside. Earlier, Lepin had noticed that the princess had given him a Kanya flower handkerchief at the tournament, and said that when Kale was little, she had also given him a Kanya flower handkerchief. She thought that there was no more suitable flower for a knight, because in the language of flowers it meant, and then they said in chorus that no misfortune should interfere with their happiness. Lepin also said that the Kanya handkerchief was her last gift to Kale, for when he was 10, her husband died, and he had to take his burden, and she was not there when he needed it. Then she thought only of her own feelings. Because of her, the boy who had once been very kind had closed himself off, and yet Kale had begun to change again thanks to Eliza. Elisa's existence alone was a great escape for him. When her mind returned, she immediately wanted to ask Eliza if she could stay with Kale for the rest of her life. Then, taking Lepin's hands in hers, she promised her that she would. Already at night, she had thought that Mistress Lepin sometimes found it very hard to keep her sanity, but even in her sanity, she was so worried about Kale, and he must have taken kindness in her mistress. She so wished she could help them. Suddenly, Kale came into the room and was thinking about something, but Eliza was glad they could finally talk alone. She also said he'd been great tonight. But he noticed her revealing cleavage on her nightgown, and blushing, he turned his head away and asked why she was still up. Then she said she was just thinking about something and asked him for his hand. When they put their palms together, she was surprised at how big his hand was. Now she understood why he wielded his sword so easily. Her hand was so small compared to his. Now the only thing she could do was hold his hand, but as soon as he needed it, he could always lean on it. But suddenly blushing, he turned away from her and said that he had completely forgotten about the government business he had left. Eliza was worried about him because he was so tired and thought it would be better for him to do the work tomorrow, but he said he had to do it now. So he took her and wrapped her in a plaid. He felt that she had had a busy day today, so she should rest properly. He also felt that he could no longer contain his inner beast, and so he hurried away. The next morning, Eliza sat on the bench with her mistress again, and the maids could not get enough of the fact that she was always followed by animals, and they were always drawn to her. Sunset started to chase the other rabbits away because it was his place, but Eliza reminded him she told him to be friendly with the others, or she wouldn't hug him. But he still warned them not to go further than the edge of her skirt. At that moment, one of the maids came up to them and brought Elise a twig because she thought the golden rabbit was nervous, so she brought it. It seemed to Lepin that it was thanks to Elise that she had been so sane for so long. But she didn't think it was her, but the animals. Lepin also said that Kale was quite possessive, and even as a child he had never wanted to share or lose what was his. But Eliza couldn't believe she was talking about Kale, because it wasn't like him. Kale watched Eliza and his mother's conversation from the window and realized that she fit into their society quite easily and confidently. Isak thought that soon they would be able to talk without an interpreter. Isak also said that he had already prepared a list of events outside the palace in which Mrs. Eliza could participate. When Kale looked at the list, he said that a tour of the places would be enough, and there was no need to inconvenience her with other activities. Isak realized that he was afraid to show her to others, and then offered to give her a tour around Brooch Mountain. In fact, Lady Lepin reminded him that the anniversary of the previous king's death was approaching, and she had expressed a desire to visit the castle on the mountain with Lady Eliza. Kale said it was possible if Eliza herself was willing. Isak wanted to go and ask her about it, but Kale stopped him and said that he would go and talk to her himself. At sunset, Kale was still practicing on the training ground, and Eliza came to him at Isak's request to watch him practice. It was then that he noticed Eliza and beckoned her over. When she came closer, she saw the many cuts on his arm. He thought it was nothing serious and just scratches, but she told him to stay here and she would be right back. A couple minutes later, she came back with bandages and started bandaging the wounds. It could have been worse if he hadn't done anything. Kale decided to ask if there were any herbs that could help him heal. Eliza said that he could always get hurt, and if he was in the palace all the time, he wouldn't be able to get medicine for himself, so she learned how to find herbs. After she had finished dressing him, she asked him why he had called her. He said that the anniversary of the king's death was approaching, and he wanted to ask if she would like to visit Brooch Castle with his mother. She asked him what kind of castle it was. Kale replied that on the northern continent it was some sort of country residence, it wasn't that far from here. Then her eyes lit up as it could be considered traveling. Eliza said with confidence that she had to go, and it was the first time she was going on a trip, not counting her trip to the northern continent. Suddenly he blushed and thought that she probably would have preferred to go somewhere far away then. He couldn't understand why his heart wouldn't settle. He thanked her for agreeing to the trip, and then she said it would be the best trip the three of them had ever been on. But Kale immediately said that he wouldn't be able to accompany her on the trip because he had a lot of state business to attend to. After this news, Eliza sank and her mood sank. Kale noticed this and decided that it would be better if he promised that they would have many more ways to spend time together. Kale said that she hadn't seen that pack of wolves lately, and Eliza said that she hadn't seen the pack leader who had shared the information with her in a long time either. Then Kale joked to her that she had a wolf informant. In the same second, she faltered and said she was talking about the wolf who came to the castle more often than anyone else, and hoped no one had seen him. She wished she could be honest with Kale, but for the sake of the animals, she had to be more careful. The girl was already humming in the morning as she packed up her things for her journey. A couple minutes later, there was a knock at her door, and when she allowed her husband and his maids to enter the room. She had been sad at first that she was leaving, but now she was in a pleasant excitement. Isak said that Mr. Kale had prepared something special for her trip. Then the maids brought in a lot of dresses. They also brought in a lot of jewelry and shoes. Eliza was pleasantly surprised by this surprise. Then a maid brought her a suit that Mr. Kale had ordered especially for her. She was also given the shoes and noted that no animal skins had been used in the making of them. Eliza was touched by these gifts, but she immediately remembered her father telling her that no one would care for her and pity her too. So she didn't know if she had the right to accept such gifts. Without any further ado, Kale walked over to her and put her foot on his knee and began to take off her shoes and put on a new one. Eliza blushed and couldn't understand what he was doing, but then he looked up and said with a smile that he hoped her journey would be comfortable and pleasant. Now she saw for the umpteenth time how everyone was doing their best for her alone. They left in the evening, and in the carriage, she thought about how when she first came to the northern continent, it had been very cold and hard on her. But as it turned out, even the weather was not as cold and lonely as her heart. But now things were different. She wanted to prove that she had become a worthy mistress. Mistress Lepin had remarked that the warmth had so suddenly replaced the bitter cold, and Eliza agreed and said it would be wonderful if Kale could come with them. Then Mistress said that just looking at something good brought back memories of good people. It also seemed to her that spring had sprung in Kale's heart too. Then she asked Eliza to look out the window and told her that they had arrived. Lepin was glad that she could show Eliza the castle brooch, for she and Kale had so many memories of it. As they got out of the carriage, Elise realized that she wanted to learn as much as she could about Kale. When they were in the castle and sitting by the fireplace with hot tea, Lepin asked how much Elise thought it had cost. But Eliza didn't even know because the castle was quite simple and cozy, so she couldn't imagine how long it took. Then Lepin said that this room was a special place because it had been given the most attention, because all the shelves and the books had been made especially for Kale. Elise was amazed at the sheer number of books, and then Mistress said that he had read them all. He had always been a very well-read boy since he was a little boy who loved books. Mistress also said that if the previous king had not died so early, Kale could have had a happy childhood where he could have enjoyed reading his favorite books. Then Mistress changed the subject and asked if Eliza knew that there was a secret room behind the opposite wall. But of course, Eliza didn't know about it. Mistress said that neither the castle managers nor even the head of the guards knew about it. So she went over to the shelf and ran her hand over the books, and after a second, the door opened. She asked if Eliza would like to look in with her. As they walked down the corridors, the lady told Eliza that the late king had wanted to create a place that only their family would know about. Eliza also remarked that it was like a labyrinth. The lady also recalled that the previous king had an adventurous spirit. Eliza listened to her stories and became sad as she realized that she still missed her husband. The lady went on to say that it was because of this trait of his that many memories of secrets that only they knew about had accumulated in this place. Eliza decided to ask if Kale knew about this place, and Mistress said that he probably didn't remember it since the last time he was here was when he was a baby. When they reached the right place, Mistress turned a lever and a door to a large spacious room opened in front of them. Mistress walked to the back of the room, saying it was like a small museum. Eliza walked over to a dresser above which hung a portrait of someone. The mistress said that it was of a deceased king, and he and Kale looked a lot alike, but in fact their personalities were very different. Every time Mistress longed for her husband, she would come to Brooch and look at that portrait and just stand there. Then she was estranged from Kale, but the more he became like his father, the clearer everyone realized what kind of man he would become. She sat down and cried because in the end she had just lost her mind, and she didn't deserve to even just stand next to him. Eliza said that if Kale could see this place, he would understand why she missed her dead husband so much, because this place had been created in the castle by his father for the whole family, and for Kale as well, and all their memories and her longing for the loss of his majesty would be passed on to Kale. Eliza sat down next to Mistress and took her hands and asked her not to leave Kale. Suddenly, Eliza and Mistress heard a howl coming from the forest. Then Mistress said that behind one of the walls there was a passage leading into the forest. So they decided to go through it and see what happened there. When they got out of the passage, they saw a she-wolf and a cute little wolf cub. The she-wolf looked at the girl and said her name. Eliza couldn't understand how she knew her. The she-wolf said kind with green hair and a pretty face, which is exactly how he described Eliza to her. Eliza couldn't understand who had told her about her, and then realized it was the pack leader. The she-wolf said that he was now busy guarding the territory. Then Eliza realized that his wife was not in the castle with him because she had given birth. The she-wolf also said that thanks to Eliza they had food, and she was able to give birth in peace, and for that she thanked the girl. Mistress wanted to reach out her hand to the she-wolf, but she froze, and then the she-wolf asked Eliza to tell her that everything was fine and she could pet her. Eliza then gently picked up the little wolf cub and handed it to Mistress. Mistress then remembered that she had once held the just-born Kale as well. Suddenly, the she-wolf smelled a strange odor, and then they saw smoke behind the forest. Eliza realized it was definitely a fire and asked Mistress to get the wolves to safety. But Mistress didn't understand what she would do. Eliza said that she had something to find, and then she rushed out of the place and thought about the rubbing that she had to find it. Meanwhile, Mistress was running with the wolf cub in her arms and the she-wolf away, and when they stopped, she thought that she had to come back alive because a mother had to keep her child safe. In the meantime, Eliza had reached the door to the castle and there was a lot of smoke coming from it. But the fire was still far away, and when she went inside, she saw the portrait skewed on the wall. As soon as she tried to reach it, her eyes started to get dizzy and dark, but she still wanted Kale to see her father's face. She wanted him to know there was someone else who loved him. She managed to get the portrait out and fell to the floor with it. And then she thought that when she was in the castle, the easiest way to escape the smoke was to lie on the floor. But in the woods, the fire would probably be worse, and she didn't know what she should do. When she was already confused, the door to the room was kicked open by her horse. Then the horse said that it had been looking for her for a long time, and she had to hurry. So the girl got on her horse and they quickly galloped away from that burning room. While they were riding, Eliza noticed that her strength had increased, and then the horse said that she wanted to become a cool horse, and she promised Eliza that she would become like the black horse. Suddenly, Eliza heard a girl calling for help, and she asked the horse to stop, as there was a courtier who was about to faint. But the horse said that it was impossible to take her, as her back was very small, and it would not be possible to put someone else on it. But still they stopped, and the courtier could not understand why the lady was trying to save her like her.